The summer of 1989 was supposed to be the best of their lives. Sarah Mitchell, Danny Rodriguez, and Kevin Walsh had just graduated from Jefferson High School in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and were ready to celebrate their freedom before college split them apart forever. The three had been inseparable since middle school. Sarah with her quick wit and dreams of becoming a journalist, Danny the athlete with a scholarship to Iowa State, and Kevin the quiet artist who could make anyone laugh with his impressions of their teachers. On July 15th, they packed Danny's red 1987 Ford Mustang with camping gear, snacks, and a cooler full of Coca-Cola, planning a week-long road trip to Colorado. They wanted to see the Rocky Mountains, camp under the stars, and create memories that would last a lifetime. Their parents had been hesitant. 3 teenagers driving halfway across the country, but the kids had saved their money from summer jobs and promised to call every night. Before we continue with this incredible story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring you these compelling true stories that deserve to be told. The last confirmed sighting of the 3 friends was at a gas station in North Platte, Nebraska, around 3:30 p.m. on July 16th. The attendant, Earl Thompson, remembered them clearly because Sarah had asked for directions to Interstate 76, which would take them through Colorado. She had bought a postcard of the local water tower, joking that she was documenting every stop on their adventure. Danny had filled up the tank and bought a road map, spreading it across the hood of the Mustang, while Kevin pointed out different routes they could take. They seemed like good kids, Earl would later tell investigators. Happy, excited. The girl was taking pictures of everything with one of those disposable cameras. The boys were arguing about whether to take the scenic route or the fastest one. Normal teenager stuff. That evening, when Sarah didn't call home as promised, her mother, Janet Mitchell, felt the first stirring of worry. Sarah was responsible, always keeping her word. By 10 p.m., Janet was calling the Rodriguez and Walsh families. None of the kids had made contact. The parents decided to wait until morning, thinking perhaps the group had found a campsite with no phone access. But when July 17th came and went with no word, they contacted the Nebraska State Patrol. The investigation began immediately, but the trail was frustratingly cold. The Ford Mustang, license plate number IFV 429, seemed to have vanished into thin air somewhere between North Platte and Denver. Search teams combed the highways, checked every hospital and police station along the route, and interviewed countless gas station attendants and motel clerks. The story made regional news, with the teenagers' senior photos appearing in newspapers across Nebraska, Colorado, and Iowa. Detective Frank Kowalski of the Nebraska State Patrol became the lead investigator, a 20-year veteran with 2 daughters of his own. He felt the case personally. 3 kids don't just disappear, he told the families during one of many painful meetings. Cars break down, people get lost, accidents happen, but there are always traces, always evidence. This case defied every pattern I'd seen. For months, the investigation consumed the small law enforcement agencies involved. Every lead was followed, from reported sightings in Denver to a possible car matching the Mustang's description seen in Wyoming. The families organized search parties, distributed flyers, and appeared on local television programs pleading for information. Sarah's younger brother, Mark, only 14 at the time, spent hours calling radio stations across the Midwest, asking DJs to mention the missing teens during their broadcasts. The case attracted the attention of private investigators and even some early internet sleuths who were beginning to use bulletin boards and early online networks to share information about missing persons. The mystery deepened when investigators discovered that the 3 friends had withdrawn money from their bank accounts before leaving. Sarah had taken out $200, Danny $180s, and Kevin $150s. This suggested they were planning to be gone longer than the week they had told their parents, or that they were being more careful with their money than initially thought. As 1989 turned into 1990, the active investigation began to wind down. The families refused to give up hope, but law enforcement resources were stretched thin, and new cases demanded attention. The file remained open, but Detective Kowalski admitted years later that he feared the worst. In cases like this, when young people vanish so completely, you start thinking about foul play, about predators who target travelers. It kept me awake at night. The disappearance left deep scars on the community of Cedar Rapids. Jefferson High School established a scholarship fund in the names of all 3 students, and every July the 16th, their families held a vigil at Riverside Park, where the friends had often gathered during their high school years. Sarah's mother became an advocate for missing persons, working with other families facing similar tragedies. Danny's parents moved to Phoenix in 1995, unable to bear the constant reminders of their son's absence. Kevin's father suffered a heart attack in 1993, which his family attributed to the stress and heartbreak of never knowing what happened to his boy. The years passed slowly. Sarah would have turned 30 in 1997. Danny would have been celebrating his college graduation, maybe starting a family of his own. Kevin's artistic talents, which had shown such promise, were frozen in time through the sketches and paintings he'd left behind in his bedroom, which his mother kept exactly as he'd left it for nearly a decade. Technology advanced, and with it, new possibilities for the investigation. By the mid-1990s, the case file had been digitized, and Detective Kowalski, now a lieutenant, periodically ran the license plate number through updated databases and missing vehicle reports. The internet allowed for broader sharing of information, and the case was featured on several early true crime websites, but still no solid leads emerged. The breakthrough came on September 23, 2009, exactly 20 years and 2 months after the friends had vanished. A construction crew working on a water treatment facility expansion project in Kit Carson County, Colorado, made a discovery that would reopen one of the region's most puzzling cold cases and provide answers that no one, not the families, not the investigators, not the community, could have imagined. The crew was using heavy machinery to excavate a section of land that had been overgrown with cottonwood trees and thick brush for decades. The area was adjacent to a seasonal creek that had been diverted years earlier for agricultural purposes, leaving behind a depression that had gradually filled with sediment and vegetation. As the excavator's bucket bit into the earth, it struck something metallic with a hollow clang that made the operator immediately stop the machine. What they uncovered was the rusted but recognizable shell of a 1987 Ford Mustang, buried under nearly 6 feet of earth and debris. The license plate, though corroded, was still partially readable, IFV 429. After 20 years, the car that had carried Sarah Mitchell, Danny Rodriguez, and Kevin Walsh into oblivion had been found. The Kit Carson County Sheriff's Office immediately contacted the Nebraska State Patrol, and Detective Kowalski, now nearing retirement, drove to Colorado to oversee the excavation personally. The scene was both heartbreaking and mystifying. The car was completely buried, suggesting it had been there for many years, but the location was puzzling. The excavation site was more than 50 miles south of Interstate 76, the route the friends were supposed to have taken to Denver. "It was like finding a needle in a haystack," Kowalski said later, but finding the needle only raised more questions. How did that car end up buried in the middle of nowhere? And where were Sarah, Danny, and Kevin? The forensic examination of the vehicle took weeks. The car's interior had been damaged by years of moisture and soil infiltration. But investigators were able to recover several items: Sarah's camera, still containing undeveloped film, a road atlas with several routes marked in different colored ink, Kevin's sketchbook, its pages fused together but some drawings still visible, and most mysteriously, a suicide note written in Danny's handwriting. The note, water-damaged but largely legible, spoke of feeling trapped by expectations, of not wanting to disappoint his family, and of making a pact with his friends to disappear forever rather than face the pressures of adult life. But forensic analysis revealed inconsistencies in the handwriting and paper that suggested the note might have been forged or written under duress. The developed photographs from Sarah's camera told a different story than the suicide note suggested. The images showed the three friends happy and carefree at various stops along their journey, pictures that hadn't been seen by their families or investigators 20 years earlier. There were photos from the gas station in North Platte, but also images from locations further south, including what appeared to be a small town main street and a roadside diner with a distinctive vintage sign. One photograph in particular caught investigators' attention. It showed all three friends standing beside their car, but in the background was a partial view of a road sign. Crime scene analysts were able to enhance the image enough to make out Kit Carson County on the sign, confirming that the group had indeed made it to Colorado, but had traveled much further south than anyone had suspected. The mystery deepened when investigators learned that the land where the car was found had been owned by the Hartwell family, local ranchers who had sold the property to the county in 2003. Elmer Hartwell, now in his 80s, remembered the summer of 1989 well because of an incident that had always troubled him. In late July, he had discovered that someone had been camping on his property without permission, leaving behind a fire pit and scattered trash near the seasonal creek. "I figured it was just some kids being kids," Hartwell told investigators. "Happens sometimes with city folks who don't understand about private property. But I found some things that seemed strange. Clothes scattered around like people had left in a hurry, and tire tracks that went right down to the creek bed. I cleaned it up and didn't think much more about it at the time." Hartwell's account led investigators to search the area around where the car was found more thoroughly. Using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs, they made a discovery that would finally provide answers to the families who had waited 20 years for the truth. But those answers would prove more disturbing than anyone had imagined. About 100 yards from where the Mustang was buried, the search teams found human remains, 3 sets of them, buried in a shallow grave that had been carefully concealed and had gone undetected for 2 decades. Dental records confirmed what the families both hoped and feared. The remains belonged to Sarah Mitchell, Danny Rodriguez, and Kevin Walsh. The forensic examination revealed the heartbreaking truth. All 3 had died from gunshot wounds to the head, execution style. This was not a suicide pact or a tragic accident, but a triple homicide that had been carefully covered up. The forged suicide note had been an attempt to mislead any future investigation, though its discovery 20 years later had actually helped investigators understand that the friends had been murdered. The revelation sent shockwaves through Cedar Rapids and the law enforcement community. Detective Kowalski, who had worked the case for 20 years, felt a mixture of relief and renewed determination. "We finally knew what happened to those kids, but now we had to find their killer." After 20 years, that was going to be the biggest challenge of my career. The investigation took on new urgency. The FBI joined the case, bringing advanced forensic capabilities and resources that hadn't been available in 1989. They re-examined every piece of evidence from the original investigation, interviewed hundreds of people who might have had contact with the 3 friends during their final days, and used modern technology to analyze the crime scene. A breakthrough came when investigators realized that the location where the friends were murdered was not random. The spot was accessible by a little-used ranch road that connected to a network of rural routes. but it was also secluded enough that the crime could have been committed without witnesses. This suggested that the killer was familiar with the area, either a local resident or someone who had spent considerable time in Kit Carson County. The FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit created a profile of the likely perpetrator, a male, probably in his 20s or 30s in 1989, with local knowledge of the area, possibly with a criminal history involving violence or sexual assault, and someone who would have appeared trustworthy enough to approach 3 teenagers. The profile also suggested that the killer might have convinced the friends to drive to the secluded location voluntarily, perhaps by claiming to need help or offering assistance with their car. A review of police reports from the summer of 1989 revealed several incidents in the region that fit the pattern. There had been reports of a man approaching young travelers at gas stations and rest stops, claiming to be a local who could show them scenic routes or good camping spots. Most people had declined his offers, but a few had reported feeling uncomfortable about his persistence and the way he seemed to be targeting young women or mixed groups of teenagers. The description from these reports was consistent. A white male, approximately 5'10", with dark hair and a mustache, driving a pickup truck, usually approaching people during late afternoon or early evening hours. He was described as initially friendly and helpful, but those who spoke with him longer noted something off about his demeanor. Working with this description and the behavioral profile, investigators began focusing on men who had lived in Kit Carson County in 1989 and matched the physical characteristics. The list was long, but they methodically worked through each possibility, checking alibis, criminal histories, and any connections to the area where the bodies were found. The case broke open when investigators located Patricia Hendricks, a former clerk at a gas station in Lyman, Colorado, who had been working the night shift in July 1989. When shown photos of the 3 missing friends, she immediately recognized them. More importantly, she remembered the man who had been talking to them in the station's parking lot that night. "I was getting ready to close up when these 3 kids pulled in," Patricia recalled. "Nice kids, asking about places to camp. But there was this other man who had been hanging around for most of my shift. He approached them while they were getting gas, and I could see him pointing toward the south, like he was giving them directions. Something about it felt wrong to me, but I was alone in the station and didn't want to get involved." Patricia's description of the man matched the earlier reports perfectly, but she provided additional details that proved crucial. She remembered that his pickup truck had Montana license plates, and that he had told the teenagers he knew about a beautiful camping spot by a creek that wasn't crowded like the official campgrounds. This led investigators to examine vehicle registrations from Montana for pickup trucks that had been in Colorado during the summer of 1989. The search eventually led them to William Bill Crawford, a drifter who had worked seasonal construction jobs throughout the Mountain West. Crawford had owned a blue Ford pickup with Montana plates in 1989, and his work record showed he had been employed on a pipeline project near Limon during July of that year. Crawford's criminal history revealed a pattern of escalating violence. He had been arrested multiple times for assault, sexual assault, and robbery between 1985 and 1995. Most disturbing, he had been questioned in connection with the disappearance of 2 hikers in Montana in 1991, though charges were never filed due to insufficient evidence. The hikers' bodies had eventually been found, and the case remained unsolved. When investigators finally located Crawford in 2010, he was serving a life sentence in Montana State Prison for the murder of a camper in Glacier National Park in 1995. The murder had occurred in a remote location, and Crawford had tried to bury the victim's body, showing the same pattern of behavior that had been used in the Colorado killings. Confronted with the evidence linking him to the 1989 murders, Crawford initially denied any involvement. But faced with Patricia Hendricks' identification, forensic evidence from the crime scene that included tire tracks matching his truck and the clear pattern of his other crimes, he eventually confessed to killing Sarah Mitchell, Danny Rodriguez, and Kevin Walsh. Crawford's confession revealed the horrific details of their final hours. He had approached the three friends at the gas station in Lyman, claiming to know about excellent camping spots that weren't marked on tourist maps. Trusting and eager for adventure, they had followed him to the remote location on the Hartwell Ranch. Once there, Crawford had robbed them of their money, and when Sarah tried to run for help, he had shot all three to prevent them from identifying him. He showed no remorse, Detective Kowalski said after Crawford's confession. He talked about killing those kids like he was describing a routine task. It was chilling to realize that Sarah, Danny, and Kevin had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, victims of a predator who had been hunting travelers along those highways for years. The case was finally closed in December 2010, more than 21 years after the three friends had disappeared. Crawford pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death, though he would die of cancer in prison before the sentence could be carried out. For the families, the resolution brought both relief and renewed grief. They finally knew what had happened to their children, but the knowledge that Sarah, Danny, and Kevin had suffered and died in such a senseless way was almost unbearable. Janet Mitchell, Sarah's mother, spoke for all the families when she said, "We needed to know the truth, but the truth is harder than we imagined. At least now we can finally lay them to rest." The three friends were buried together in Cedar Rapids on a cold February day in 2011. Their funeral was attended by hundreds of people, former classmates who were now adults with children of their own, teachers who remembered their potential, and community members who had never forgotten their story. The service celebrated their lives rather than focusing on their tragic deaths, with speakers sharing memories of Sarah's determination to be a journalist, Danny's kindness to younger students, and Kevin's artistic talent. A memorial was established at Jefferson High School, featuring some of Kevin's artwork and excerpts from Sarah's writing. The memorial included a plaque that read, "In memory of Sarah Mitchell, Danny Rodriguez, and Kevin Walsh. They left us too soon, but their dreams and friendship remain an inspiration." The case had a lasting impact on law enforcement as well. The 20-year investigation had demonstrated both the challenges and the importance of never giving up on cold cases. Detective Kowalski, who retired shortly after Crawford's conviction, established a foundation to support families of missing persons and to advocate for better resources for cold case investigations. "Those 3 kids deserved justice, and their families deserved answers," he said. "It took 21 years, but we never stopped looking. Every missing person, every unsolved case, represents someone's child, someone's hope. We owe it to them to never stop searching for the truth." The story of Sarah Mitchell, Danny Rodriguez, and Kevin Walsh serves as both a tragedy and a testament to the persistence of those who refuse to let the missing be forgotten. Their road trip that was supposed to create a lifetime of memories instead ended their lives, but their story continues to inspire others to be cautious, to look out for one another, and to never stop fighting for justice. Today, their families still gather every July 16th, not just to mourn what was lost, but to celebrate 3 young lives that, though cut short, continue to touch others through their story. In the end, Sarah, Danny, and Kevin got their wish to create memories that would last forever, just not in the way they had imagined.